Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. I am thrilled today to have one of my favorite human beings who's definitely a friend, but like a brother. I've known him for quite some time. He's come into the podcast today to share some of his story. His name is Ryan. So, Ryan, you're off camera to protect your identity and to create safety for your family, which everybody on my podcast completely understands. So, thank you for coming in today, brother.
Absolutely my pleasure as a guy whose life has been changed and turned around thanks to guys like you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for allowing me to participate and talk a little bit today.
Well, you've got so much to give, and I want to jump right in. So, the strength of stories like this, you that are watching and listening, if you've watched any of my episodes, you know that I love to bring in real people who are navigating through the waters of infidelity. Some betrayed, some unfaithful, some both, who are trying to find life after one of the most devastating things a human being can go through. And Ryan has some nuances to his story that I know are going to help many of you unfaithful and many of you betrayed. So, Ryan, when was D Day? And talk a little bit about what happened.
Yeah. So mine is one of those stories that I tend to think might scare some people away. Certainly the betrayed might throw some fear into their bodies. But my D-Day took place just about 4+ years ago. But for a little bit of context, I'm a three-time unfaithful. First affair was many, many, many years ago. My wife and I have been married for about 26 years. Notice that I said my wife and I, because we're still married by the grace of God. 1 year affair many, many years ago, followed by a second affair with a coworker. And then my most recent and most damaging affair was a multi-year physical and emotional affair with a coworker. I'll just bring the audience into some of that backstory because it'll set some things up. But we had actually kind of recovered after the second affair. We had seen a counselor or two and got some well-meaning therapy and some help, but I was still unwilling to let go of the lies, which will be a theme that we'll talk about in a minute. But then entering this last affair that lasted a number of years, physical, emotional, as I said, my wife actually found out about this affair when one of our daughters actually saw a message on my computer. This was an affair where, we met at work, we were friends, she lived locally, we visited each other's, cities and hung out in coffee shops, and we traveled together and, kind of did all those terrible things you do when you're messed up and mixed up in an affair, and told every lie you could tell, mastered the art of gaslighting and just hit everything we could. But it all kind of hit the fan when, as I said, when one of our daughters saw a message on my computer, and that kicked off 9 months of me absolutely trickle truthing her to death, torturing her with trying to protect her, what I thought was the right thing, even though I knew the right thing to do was to just let it all out. But boy, I did everything wrong in the book that you could possibly do after everything came out. So that's kind of the intro on me.
So I know that many betrayed, man, they've experienced trickle truthing just out the wazoo. Some people call it drip feeding, trickle truthing. It is by definition giving up a little bit of detail, a little bit of detail. Now, you said something that's interesting, Ryan. You said, I knew I should have given it all out. I know that every betrayed spouse, male or female, would say, okay, why did you trickle truth? What was the motivation behind it? So think back, what was going on in your brain when you were doing the trickle truthing or drip feeding?
God, if I don't say this right now, I don't have any integrity. First off, like I completely regret how much I tortured my wife by doing that, and I remain today very hurt. I know she is too. That they say that one of the most damaging things you can do is just trickle truth them to death and just give little bits of info. So where my head was, right? On one side, I was trying to preserve. I was scared to death after everything hit the fan, but I was trying to preserve what I had at home. We were the Christmas card family, good income. I work in tech, beautiful wife, great daughters. Everything looked great on the Christmas card. But the marriage was an absolute disaster. So as my life was crumbling down, I was desperate to protect that, even though I had done everything to try and destroy it. Things like phone records were ordered from Verizon, and I was trying to work with the mailman to prevent them from getting into her hands. And it was just, it's just so torturous, what I did. But I was trying desperately to preserve what I had. And I'll tell you this is kind of juicy. I was so screwed up in the head so unhealthy with who I was at the time and trying to protect me and my world that we found a fair recovery. And we'll come back to that in a minute, right? Because I know you speak very highly of Rick Reynolds, the founder there. We enrolled in one of their courses for couples during the 9 months that after D-Day that I was still in correspondence with the AP because I was putting on the right face, right? Because I just was trying to preserve all of it. But in the background, I was just this monster. So I think it was a bit of, it was fear, it was preservation, it was confusion. I was just a total mess. And I was the definition of a wrecking ball to my wife, my family, my friends, and myself.
So, what made you finally have to come clean? What finally boxed you in enough to have you finally give up all the information?
Yeah, that's boy, that was a rough one. So the answer is a polygraph. And
Mm.
a lot of unfaithful out there right now are going, oh man, he just said that word. Like, I hope my
Right.
betrayed spouse doesn't hear it, right? And I felt
Yep.
the same way. But here's the background. Polygraphs, therapists with all the fancy letters behind their name will tell you that polygraphs are really only appropriate in a very small, maybe 10 or so percent of the population when it comes to infidelity. They were entirely what I needed and entirely appropriate in my situation. Why? Because I was unwilling to let go of the lies. That was my forcing function. To those out there, those unfaithful who were able to have that come to Jesus moment on their own and just give up the story willingly for the benefit of their betrayed and even for themselves, I commend you. That takes courage. I didn't have that courage. And I know that, but I had proverbially my come to Jesus moment with a gun pointed at my head where my wife said, at our therapist's recommendation, I need you to take a polygraph because I have some questions that are really important to me and I need answers to those. And I need you to do this. And I had no other choice. It was do it or leave. And leaving wasn't an option. So telling the truth had to be.
So, did she ask you to take a polygraph, and that's when you knew you had to come up with all of the information that you hadn't told her? Or did you fail the first polygraph? What brought you to the point where you said, here's all the info that you don't know?
Yeah, no, excellent question. So I can tell you that they are scary, almost mentally torturous exercises, but they are good in the outcomes. It's somewhat humbling, but think of what I was doing to her. So, no pity party for me. We got to a point where the therapist and my wife were simply recommending, he was recommending and she was demanding, because we got to a point where she had questions and she needed answers, and there was no way to verify those answers with any sort of printed material or digital material. There were some places she wanted to dive into that she wanted answers to. And it came down to this. Over the course of those 2 weeks before the test, I would lie there on the couch, which had become my bed, and I would think through, I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail. I'm going to
Mm.
fail. And so I got to literally the day before the test, and I woke up and I said, I have to tell him. This is my come to Jesus moment. So that evening, it was just the two of us, and I went out to the couch. I said, listen, I just have to come clean. You want to know these 6 things? Here it is. And I said it in the softest, most humblest way, and explained to her everything. Now, this is what's really important. What that allowed me to do was show up at the exam the next day, and she came with me. It allowed me to simply validate with the polygraph the answers that I had given her. Notice that I didn't say I passed, right? Because that passing doesn't really work when all you're validating what you did before and all those answers. So I went in, and the polygraph was able to validate that I was truthful with her in those very sensitive, painful answers that she wanted answers to.
Well, I know that for many, they have and they do come forward with everything and they do bring out the information. But oftentimes, they we unfaithful struggle to give it all up. We think I need to control the information. And if she or he knows this, they're going to divorce me for sure. If he or she finds this information out, that's going to be the nail in the coffin. So in that moment, you knew you had to take the polygraph. Some people would still go through with it, but more people come to that moment like you did on the couch where you go, okay, I got to give it up. What was going through your mind when you said, hey, I need to sit and talk with you on the couch? I mean, that had to be one of the most terrifying moments that you in your married life probably experienced, right?
No, you're spot on. And for the betrayed, please understand that the person talking to you today, 4 years later, speaks with a totally different perspective than the person who was sitting across from his betrayed spouse at that time. I've had a front row seat to just how much pain infidelity can cause. So in this case, Sam, I had a choice. I could leave, not take the test, and I could leave, walk, right? And that changes everything. Relationship I have with my
Right.
wife, our daughters, etc. That wasn't an option to me. So a gun forced to the head. And I looked at it like, you know what? It's going to end if I don't do it, but I have a very small chance of it not ending if I do do it. And so having that very painful, very difficult to say those words out loud about all the things she wanted to hear conversation, that was a better alternative. And I have to tell you again, it's not appropriate in most relationships, but in mine, where I was torturing her, hiding things, protecting the flow, or preventing the flow of information, controlling the flow of information, not giving her an informed kind of consent to go forward with me and explore building a new relationship. That wasn't fair. I had to put it out there. I finally did. And I know we'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's so much better for having done it. Just so sad that that was the catalyst that finally unclinched my fist from all of those lies.
And I think that's beautiful imagery, right? It just
Yeah.
unclenched your fist. At some level, probably finally created the opportunity for your heart to start to break when your wife's heart had been breaking for quite some time. And for those of you that are watching and listening, yes, the polygraphs can be very effective in many cases. In some cases, you may not need them. But the polygraph must be administered by an expert, and there are nuances to doing a polygraph the right way. And if you need more help on that, you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you. But it's not just like, hey, I'm going to go get a polygraph and everything's going to be great, blah, blah, blah. There's some boundaries to how many questions you ask. There's some boundaries to who you work with. There's some boundaries to the approach to have to think through. So regaining the story or readdressing it. So you take the polygraph. Did you pass the first one?
Yes. So I passed, if you want to call it that, really validated that. The decision that my wife and I made, based on some really good advice from our therapist, was that I would continue to take polygraphs with a consistent approach every 2, 3 months. The reason for that was that allowed my wife, who had access to my phone, to my PC, password, she had Life 360, that allowed her to not have to feel that need to check everything every day, every 5 minutes, because she knew that a few months from now, and or whenever she wanted, I would go down and take another one, that she would get answers to all of the things she wanted to know. And what we did is we created a set of maintenance questions. Have you had contact with the AP? Have you tried to communicate with the AP in any way? Have you tried to communicate with the AP through someone else? Have you acted in an unfaithful way that we had a mutual understanding? So we had things like that. Again, it relieved her from having to do that constant check. Now, today, many, many years down the road, we're in a position where I take, went from doing it every couple months to every quarter to every 6 months now to about every year. And eventually, I think it'll go to a place where she can literally keep in her back pocket the idea of, I'd like you to go down and see the polygrapher. My answer will be, you got it. Let's go. Like, no
Okay, hold on.
problem, no fear.
That's right there. And for the listener, for the viewer, this is where I know for the past 15, 20 minutes, some people are sitting here going, wait a minute. This dude was trying to accost the mail carrier to get the phone record. He was stooping to that level of behavior. He had the audacity to go and take a course at a fair recovery while he was still engaged in high risk behavior, infidelity, what have you. And so the fact that you just said it, she said, I want you to go and take another polygraph. And your answer was, you got it. So, dude, what changed? Because I know many betrayers sitting here, some of them are probably saying, I wish my unfaithful was like this. Other ones are sitting here going, well, wait a minute, what changed? What went on for you to have such an approach that's a complete 180 to say, absolutely, I am happy to take a polygraph? I mean, what went on inside of you?
Yeah, I think that is how I honestly feel. I think the biggest thing is that as I was doing these polygraphs, I was building back trust in her eyes and showing up very differently. This was the tail kicking or the kick in the rear end that I needed. And it's really sad that this had to be the catalyst. But this was goodness for me. This pushed me into a place where I was finally out, able to be in the sunshine, as I like to say it, right? And one of the things I was thinking about as we were talking about putting this thing together is the men's clothing store, Men's Warehouse. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That right?
Yep.
Okay, maybe it's a West Coast thing or whatever, where I live. But the CEO used to have this tagline. He'd say, "You're going to like the way you look." I got
Mm.
to tell you, when you're into recovery and you start to change for the positive, you're not going to like the way you look. You're going to love the way you look. I started to respect the guy that was in the mirror. I started to like that guy. I started to feel better about who I was becoming. And with each month, with each season that went on in recovery, when I was doing the right things for the right reason, not because my wife wanted it, not because, my God was telling me one thing, but because I wanted it. I don't ever want to go back to being that guy, right? Rick Reynolds, I've heard others say it, right? 10 miles down the road, but 10 feet from the ditch. I really like that, right? So the takeaway is when you have that epiphany where you realize, man, like I can really be somebody great again, somebody who I respect, who I admire, who I like when I look in the mirror. That's a good damn feeling, and it feels good. It takes a ton of work, but we can talk about that.
So, inevitably, when people hear a story like this, sometimes they go, his wife must be mentally off. Why would his wife give him a shot after doing so much to hide the information and so much hypocrisy and so much just attempt at self protection? So, talk a little bit about your wife and talk a little bit about what the marriage is like now, because you've given the audience a front row seat to your dysfunction and to your level of deception, which I'm sure some people go, oh my gosh. Now, there's many betrayeds out there who have chosen to stay, who are in healthy marriages going, yep, makes total sense. But for those that are grappling with it, Ryan, talk a little bit about your wife and how much work she's had to do.
Yeah, well, I have to pause. I think you and I started talking a few years back, and there was many a time where I didn't think I would ever get to a point where she loved me again, or where she was committed again, and you would encourage me. My wife is the strongest, coolest person I know. And I know that there's some betrayed out there saying, "Oh, he's just saying that." Wrong, wrong. Like there's a heart of a lion in her. I think that initially she was unwilling to allow what was happening in the devastation in her life and our relationship to impact our kids. So whether good timing, good luck, whatever you want to phrase it, she was unwilling to disrupt their lives before they went off to school. And that bought me a little bit of time. And that sounds selfish. It just is what it is. It was the timing. I used a portion of that time to start to change a little bit. And I think she found herself in a scenario where she was willing to keep the smallest window of hope open that I could change or potentially we could change, the very smallest. And she actually said one time, like, only you would have the audacity to think that could pull this off or stay, right? Kind of thing. And but she is the strongest person I know. Now, with respect to the marriage, I used this word earlier, catalyst. I hate the fact that a polygraph was a catalyst that allowed me to unclench my fist and let go of the lies.
Right.
I also hate, like abhor, despise the fact that infidelity was the catalyst to us building this new relationship. They often say kids change your life. They don't change your life. They blow up your life and give you this new one, right? So what recovery has done for both of us, because she has spent long hours working on herself. I've spent long hours working on myself. We've done countless programs together. She's, co-led groups. She's menteed. Like we've been there, done that, invested our heart, soul, pocketbook, right, wallet, and everything. But our marriage today, and I mean this, I will put our marriage up against anybody's marriage. It is one of the sexiest, coolest, fun, connected relationships of anybody I know. And I can read her, and she can read me. And I hate what I did to us, but I am so grateful beyond words that at night She holds my hand when we're falling asleep. She says, or I say, I love you. And it's a place that I never thought I would really get to. But we both did the work and somehow wound up in this place with this new, cool, fun relationship that we're going to take into the second half of our lives. And I'm just the luckiest guy on the planet that she was willing to fight and fight for her healing, allow me to fight for mine, and stay open-minded and hopeful that we could build something new and different and cool.
I love it. Now, you said something. I take a lot of flack for this in my videos. I'll say, you got to do the work, you got to do the work. And, there's people that are blowing me up all the time. What's the work? What's the work? And a lot of times I kind of want to be cynical and say, it's what you're not doing. Because if you're having to ask me, you're not doing the work, right? So we didn't even talk about this off camera. I'm excited to hear your answer because you are a straight shooter. You're just a strong type A, but you have such a grace for obviously your family, but other people who are hurting. And I know other men are resonating with so much of what you say, but kind of impromptu, when you think about the work, what was the work for you? And what are some of the work that you're still doing now?
Yeah. So I'll give you a quick set of three things. Remember, I said healing feels really good. Now, in order to get there, first, when you talk about doing the work, you want to be a great baseball player and throw a knuckle curve, or you want to be a great singer or dancer, you got to work at it. And that means working on yourself. You got to work on healing yourself. Again, we'll define what that means in just a moment, but you have to heal for yourself because whether or not your relationship survives, and I really hope it does, right? You need to heal for yourself so that you are a great combination for somebody else down the road, right? And if that means your relationship heals, that's great, right? And then when we talk about actually doing the work, there are so many resources out there. If you I remember something you said a long time ago, if you put half as much energy into your
Mm,
recovery as you did in perpetuating your affair, oh my God, what could you do? Right. So what does the work
right.
mean? Like, so the work means like, okay, I'll give you a bunch of different things. How freaking hard is it to open up a podcast and listen to Ask the Unfaithful or Ask the Betrayed? How hard is it to listen to a video on recovery? How hard is it to buy a book, read an article, check out an Instagram thing? And I know not everyone's on social media, but like there's all these resources out there. It's not hard. Go to Google, search for infidelity recovery programs, and there are some amazing ones out there. Sign up, right? Find a course, like invest in you. And here's the positive things. One, you will start to feel better about who you are as you start to make changes. But like you and I talked about, if you're somebody who wants to build a new relationship with that person you hurt, they are watching you. They're looking for you, as you taught me, to be a leader. So pick up the mantle of leadership, sign up for a course, find an article, share a video, work on yourself a little bit every day. And just like going to the gym, the pounds will come off, the muscle will start to be defined. You're going to find yourself in a totally different spot, but it takes a while. And boy, it takes a lot of sweat.
What I hear you saying is you got to want it.
Yeah,
And even if you don't know if your marriage is going to make it, you've got to want it for yourself, right?
absolutely right. Like you have to want this. Like you can't change for somebody else because at some point you'll run out of motivation. Like the idea of if you're trying to lose a ton of weight, right, for somebody else at some point you're going to break down and it's just not going to work. But at the end of the day, you really are going to like the way you look. You're going to like the way you feel. You're going to love the way you love. And notice how I said that. You're going to love the way you connect and the person that you're going to turn into. But you have to be willing to fight for it. You have to be willing to do that work, put in those hours. But boy, the rewards are just something that you may think is just never going to happen. But trust me, look at what we talked about 20 or so, 25 minutes ago. Like, look at the story I told. 3-time unfaithful, did everything he could to destroy everything he had, put in the work, got a little lucky by having a woman who's an absolute warrior and who was willing to fight. And now we have something that, again, I'd put ours up against anybody's today. I'm the luckiest guy in the whole wide world.
So I tell the story 20, 25 some odd years ago of sitting in my car by myself at probably one of the most lowest, hopeless moments. And I remember I called this guy who was like a mentor to me, and I just was like, dude, I don't know. Like I don't have any hope that this is going to work out. I don't know my head from my ass, forgive my language. I was so lost. And so, where you sit right now, having come through multiple Vietnams, if you will, to be at a place where life looks a whole lot different than 3, 4, 5 years ago. And if you were to encourage those that are sitting here going, dude, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to get out of this rut, or I don't know that I can. They're just lost. They're hopeless, unfaithful, or betrayed. If you were to reach out to them, if you had just a few minutes of encouragement and support for those that are just trying to keep their head above water. And when I say keep their head above water, I mean sometimes life or death, just trying to make it through another day. What would you offer to them as someone who has been right where they are at?
Yeah. First off, I have great empathy for folks who are on both sides of the equation, right? Wrestling with the shame and the remorse. If you've walked the footsteps that I'd walked, and then having had a front row seat to the pain and devastation that betrays feel, I get it. As much as I could possibly get it, I get it. I think the first thing I would tell you is just have hope, brother. Like the sun will come up tomorrow and it ideally will be a little bit brighter for you. That's the first thing I tell you. Have a little bit of hope. Second, you really can heal. And let me repeat that. You can heal. You can heal yourself. You don't have to be made of money, an internet connection. There's unlimited resources out there. You really, I don't want to say should, but doggone it, you just gotta want to heal your soul, right? And I hope you don't find yourself in a situation, but you really can. And then secondly, or third rather, you really can heal your relationship. It's crazy and it takes a bunch of time. Some places will tell you 18 to 24 months. Ours took almost 4 years to get to a point where she said, I'm committed to you. It took another 3 months after that to hear the words, I love you, that I never thought I'd hear again. So I think it comes down to hope. You can heal yourself. You can heal your relationship. Takes a lot of work and a little bit of luck. And I'll end by just telling you that you really are going to love the way you look and feel. You're going to be a different person, and that's worth fighting for. If there's one message in this, that's worth fighting for. You are worth it. And ideally, your relationship can heal from it too.
I love it so much. I just love that we can present to people who are in crisis that there are people that heal their marriage. There are people that move on from infidelity. There are people who are living productive, successful, wonderful lives with healed marriages. But you don't hear about them. You do hear a lot of angry people, a lot of hurt people, a lot of raging people. But today you've heard from Ryan with the story that maybe worse than yours, maybe not as bad as yours. But I try really hard to present to so many people that kind of listen and watch, hey, here are some healed individuals that are doing it. So can you. There's no reason, male or female, those of you that are watching and listening, that you can't be a Ryan or that you can't be a Ryan's wife. I don't know what your story is. I don't know what your situation is, but you've heard from someone today who went out of their way to specialize in being a human wrecking ball, just like me. If there's hope for Ryan and there's hope for me and there's hope for people like Rick Reynolds and James Anir and so many other people in this space, man, there's absolutely hope for you. If I can help, you can reach out to me at samshealingpodcast@gmail.com. You can leave a comment. You can message me on any platform that you're watching and listening. But Ryan, man, I'm overjoyed that we finally got you in. I think that there's so much that you just shared with so many people that are trying to make sense out of the collateral damage of their own choices, let alone their spouses. So thank you coming in. And as always, when somebody comes in and does such a great job, I have to find a way to bribe you to come back in again. So just count on that, okay?
I'm 100% in, and thanks for the opportunity. You have played a huge role and turned me into the guy that I am today. So, with great gratitude, and to your listeners, thanks. Just keep up the faith, keep hope alive.
I'm thrilled that you tuned in today. We'll see you next time on the podcast.